conversation between friends over a passage of Scripture. I'm Carolyn Kirsten.
And I'm Marvin Williams.
And today is episode 146.
All right.
Continuing looking at the Gospels. Last episode, the Pharisees and Sadducees turned up the heat, testing Jesus. And starting off today, he has some thoughts for them.
Jesus is turning up the heat for them.
We will get to that in a minute.
Yeah. So let me ask a question. If you wanted to be noticed for being a good worker, like you want people to notice you being a good worker, you being good at your job, what would you do?
Okay. This is like getting at one of my besetting sins, actually. Because I definitely want to get credit for my good work. It does make me think back, and I am embarrassed to remember, like, when I was teaching, and they had this monthly, like, Teacher of the Month award that they would give at staff meeting. I never got it. And then I would just be burning mad at the people.
Sounds like you're still a little salty about that.
Well, I'm just reflecting my previous. I have given it up, and I am embarrassed that I really did feel as strongly as I did about this award, because I was like, what? I did think, like, what do I have to do to get credit for all this stuff that I'm doing? So I don't know that really answers the question, but it definitely struck a nerve. What would you do?
Yeah, I think it's it's the subtle moments of bringing it up, like like we did we did this thing, and I wonder whose idea was that, or that may not be so very subtle, but if you bring up something, that turned out really well. And so you're thinking someone is going to take the bait and
for some praise.
Exactly. Like Carolyn or Marvin, that was a really good idea. Whose idea was that? And it's so far removed from the situation. Nobody really remembers whose idea it was. But I can tell you, it's in my journal that yes, it was my idea. So that's probably a way I would go about doing it. And the reason we ask that question is because we have a group of Pharisees and these religious leaders, particularly the Pharisees, that Jesus starts off chapter 23 of Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
With 7 woes. And woes are just simply put, they're rebukes. They're rebukes against behavior and attitudes that the Pharisees have, and I would dare say that we might have sometimes as well. Mm-hmm. And Jesus is rebuking them because they're showing off their religious mettle, if you will. They're showing they're showing up in certain places, and they're praying loud and for the public to see. They are misusing their authority. They are being hypocritical. They are saying one thing but doing something different. They are exploiting the marginalized, particularly widows. And so Jesus has a bunch of these rebukes against them. He calls them whitewashed tombs. That is, they look good on the outside, but on the inside, they're not being transformed. Ruth Haley Barton was here. They weren't bringing their transformed selves to the situation. And so we see that Jesus rebukes them, and he's serious about this because they are leading other people astray in their lives.
And I think that it may seem like, man, he's kind of harsh on these guys.
Yeah.
But it is because of that dissonance between who they were supposed to be.
Absolutely.
And even the standards they were holding other people to that they themselves didn't. So that is why there is such a strong rebuke for them. Is there was a huge difference. These were the religious leaders.
Absolutely.
They're at one point he uses the outside of the cup versus the inside of the cup.
Yeah.
Like what was on the outside did not match what was on the inside.
Yeah, and they lived in error in some of their teaching. They laid heavy burdens on people. You have to do certain things. And then they were in error in their living. And so I think that's part of the reason why we see in James chapter 3, James says, hey, shouldn't be many teachers because teachers will receive the stricter judgment. And this is a prime example of Jesus giving a stricter judgment to those who teach, in this case, teach the scriptures. And so we see that Jesus is after, again, their hearts. And he is, we've talked about this before, but I think it's worth noting again that Jesus reserved his harshest rebukes for the religious, not the ones who were marginalized, not the ones who knew that they were sinners. He reserved these are very, very harsh rebukes, and he seems to reserve them for the religious, the ones who knew better, as opposed to the ones who needed a greater sense of compassion.
Yeah, a couple things that stood out to me. At first, he's talking just about how they love to do everything to be seen, whether that is in their clothing or how they love the place of honor at banquets. It's very self-seeking, being show-offs. And Jesus reminds them in verse 8, he says, "You are all brothers and sisters." And I thought that just struck me like, you are wanting to put yourself in a position for greater attention, for greater notice. But let's remember, you're all brothers and sisters. You're all image bearers, as we talked about in a previous episode. Just that reminder of, in the previous episode, we talked about as image bearers, how we represent God, but that also is we are all image bearers. So how we treat one another matters. Yeah. In this passage, Jesus says, "You are all brothers and sisters of each other."
Yeah, and when you think of the way they walked around, the reason why Jesus had to say that, they probably didn't view other people as spiritual siblings, as individuals who were on par with them. Now, I don't know all I'm in the minds of the people, but the fact is that you are an image bearer. You are a brother or sister. So I would imagine that the Pharisees felt a sense of, what do you mean? Like we're way above them. We're not like them. And so I think Jesus saying that, I think it again a real kind of thrust of the sword in their pride and self-seeking attitudes.
For sure. And then later in verse 24, Jesus calls them blind guides. You strain out a gnat, but gulp down a camel, which is a very strong image. You can imagine. So, but then I thought, how we can do that. Our own little issues, our own personal. That was an opening question a couple episodes. Like the convictions that move us to strong action. Boy, I sure hope I'm not getting all upset about little gnats, but allowing camels to just not be bothered by that. And that was, I paused on that just thinking for myself, like, are the things that I am getting upset about or fixated on, are they appropriately sized?
Yeah. No, that's good. That's really good. So I love I love the way Jesus goes after this. Again, on the backside of this, underneath all of this, is his love for people. But it really does come out harsh, and I would say it is because they are supposed to be leading in the community. They're supposed to be leading in the religious community, and they fail to do that. And Jesus, he reserves this big harsh rebuke for them. And now we get to this story is in Mark, right?
Yes.
And this is a story.
Luke also tells it.
Okay.
But Matthew does not.
And this is probably a familiar story to some, and it is again the story of the widow, the widow's offering, and and we have, and this is in the end of Mark chapter 12, and Mark says that Jesus sat down on opposite of the treasury, and he watched people put money into the offering. And you would think that, man, this is Jesus. I thought we're not, so, the right hand is not supposed to do what the left, know what the left hand
He's
is
got a
doing.
little clipboard and tallying. Is that what you think?
Yep, Carolyn gave a mite, and so no, that's not what he's doing. I think he's looking, he's kind of watching and observing the situation to not only see the heart, but also to teach a lesson, which we find out that he does teach a lesson. And so we have Jesus in the temple, if you will. They're giving their resources. What do we have here?
Yeah, so many rich people are putting in large sums. This is a classic children's ministry lesson, so whether you're acting it out and you've just got, a bull, well, this was real. They were putting it, what did you told me?
It's like a horn.
Okay,
yep.
So there really was a sound with people's
Drop
gifts.
your money in, it makes a big sound.
Yes.
The bigger the sound, the more money you put in.
So many rich people were putting in large sums. So boom, 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 you're hearing it all.
Yep.
Then a poor widow comes and drops in 2 tiny coins worth very little.
Tink.
Yes, a dramatically different. And then Jesus draws attention to that and makes the point. Truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. So we know he's not talking about dollars and cents there.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely.
So in what sense has she put more into the treasury? He says, for they all gave out of their surplus, but she, out of her poverty, she has put in everything she had, all she had to live on.
Yeah, and again, we ask the question, in this moment, how does God evaluate our giving? He evaluates our giving not necessarily by the amount. He evaluates our giving based on our motive, also based on the ability, our ability to give, our ability to sacrifice. But again, it starts with the heart. It starts with what I have, I'm giving it to God out of sheer love for him, out of sheer joy that I get to give to the God of the universe. It all belongs to him anyway. Mm-hmm. So I am giving back to him what he's loaned to me. Going back to previous episodes, it is his vineyard. He's been gracious, and he can take the fruit anytime he desires, but he would rather us give it joyfully, willfully, and with a sense of love and grace. And that's what this woman does. She gives out of her poverty. Now that raises a question, though. So if I have a car payment, and if I have a mortgage, and the church says, hey, give sacrificially, should I just forego my car note, my bills, and all of that, and give sacrificially because God sees it and he's applauding that?
Yeah. I think that too is a heart issue.
Yeah.
And it's about stewardship. God has, everything we have belongs to God, and he has given it to us for us to take care of it. Yeah. And that for sure does include our resources as well as our bank accounts. Yeah. So if we are not being responsible and meeting the debts that we have, whether that's a car payment, whether that's paying off credit cards and not getting swallowed up in interest, those are also a part of our stewardship.
Yeah.
I mean, that is our stewardship of those resources that God has given us. So yes, we are called to not just give out of our surplus, to give sacrificially, but there is a stewardship, a heart element behind that as well.
Yeah. And again, it's, sacrificial versus appropriate, the appropriate. And so, as you mentioned, God wants us to be good stewards of all that we have. But when we look at this story, what does, what principles can we draw out regarding our attitude toward giving, our attitude toward money, and so forth.
For some of us, we might be more on the side of the rich. And it's, sure, we'll throw a $20 bill in the plate when it goes by, or scratch off a check, or, set up an online thing, because that's no big deal. That if we're giving out of our surplus and we don't even notice that the money has gone, that is not giving sacrificially. I guess I think of giving sacrificially, you should notice it in your finances. Maybe it means you are giving and then you're not going out to lunch or, going out to eat as often. And so that causes you to change your lifestyle a little bit, to do more grocery shopping and meal planning so that you can give.
Right.
I mean, that is also a reflection of stewardship, but I think that's where that sacrifice, not giving, I mean, her example is incredible, where she gave all she had. But the element of giving sacrificially, I think, is we know we're doing that when we notice the loss of that money. Like it changes something in how we're living, or our view towards
I like
money.
that. It changes our lifestyle. It changes, I'm gonna make coffee at home as opposed to spending $7, depending on, I don't get coffee like that, so I don't know how much it costs, but I know it costs probably
It's not $5
Okay,
anymore.
it's not okay. So it could mean a number. I'm not going to do that vacation because I really do see a need in somebody else's life. So I think I love that idea of when I notice it, and probably when I feel it, when that's when sacrifice becomes sacrifice. The Romans 12 passage, or even going back to the Old Testament sacrificial system, is sacrifices hurt. I'm quite sure the animals are saying like, yeah, that's not a big deal.
Right.
Like they really did lose their lives for the sake of someone else. And I think, we continually ask the question, am I losing my life for someone else? And that means, it could mean literally, but I think am I losing part of the things that I value most to give up for someone who's in need. So I think this is, again, another uncomfortable truth, but I think it drives us to think differently about.
Another element of that just came to mind is the prioritizing of our giving. That too shows a sacrifice, that I'm going to start with what I'm giving to God versus
that's very good.
At the end of the month, okay, so this
very
month we
good.
have $40 and next month it's,
No, that's really good.
That is also how we are living sacrificially, or saying, I'm going to give to God first, and then maybe we don't get to go out to eat this much, or it's not the vacation that we're going to have to postpone that. We're going to have to save a little more. Like that's how that's reflected as well.
Yeah. One of your, that is prioritizing. That was one of the questions. Okay, what can we do now to think differently about our resources? And to your point is if we are not prioritizing our giving, prioritizing it starting now would be a great way to say, the kingdom principles are causing me to think differently and have a different attitude about my resources, about God's resources that He's loaned to me. And so that's one of the things for me is like, know it all belongs to Him. Now, how does He want me to manage it?
Yeah. Well, what can we believe about God, ourselves, and others from these passages of Scripture?
Yeah, I think for what we can believe about God is that God doesn't. He's not interested in show-offs and try-hards. That's an old word from sports, a try-hard. He just simply wants our hearts, and He wants in both of these. He wants our hearts, and always double-checking. Okay, what is my heart motive behind this? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And going, to the giving story with the widow. Why were they giving their money in that way? Why were they dropping it so hard? Again, to be seen. And part of the woes that Jesus gives is that God really does look at my heart before he looks at the physical part of what I give.
Mm-hmm. I will just emphasize that because that's exactly what I was thinking. Yes, God looks at our hearts.
Yeah.
That is what we can know. All kinds of things on the outside. But what matters most is our heart. And then out of a heart to love him, to honor him, to glorify him, those actions flow out of that proper heart.
Yeah.
So then for myself, yes, how am I checking my motives? Why do is the purpose in my action to draw attention to myself or to get credit, back to our opening question? Or is my heart to love God and honor him? We can ask ourselves those questions all day long.
Absolutely.
All day long. Well, thank you, friends, for joining us. It is a pleasure to have you learn along with us, and we hope that you are reading these passages. You can find those in the description of the episode page and have a conversation with someone else this week.